I met Irving at IBM, I don't know, 15 years ago or 12 years ago or something. And when I started writing my columns in 1991, IBM's reputation was, it was kind of hidebound, gigantically bureaucratic, not all that successful in PCs, and it had a fabulous research lab, but very little of what was done there actually made it into the marketplace. And you had a lot to do with changing that culture and moving ideas at IBM into products, and I assume into the business of the organization. How did you do that?
Okay. By the way, before I answer that, let me just say, and we met briefly this summer at SD Forum in Silicon Valley, where you were honored as one of the top 4 innovators in this last year. So that was very nice.
Yeah, well, for you. Okay, thanks, but that's not.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Let me tell you, the key question is not, IBM became very, very successful with mainframes and things like that. And as often happens, and Professor Christensen has written a deep book on this, companies that become very successful, actually, and Greek playwrights wrote about this a few thousand years ago, the same things that made you great.
But they didn't do as well as Professor Christensen.
No, they haven't done as well, exactly. Well, they're dead. The same thing that made you great will turn out to be your undoing, because people forget that you were great in a certain market environment. And when that environment changes, the present leadership may not be sensitive to the change, and then you won't adapt to it. And IBM was so successful through the 70s and 80s, and the mainframes were so profitable that there were all these massive innovations in the labs, but people didn't pay attention to it because the business was taking care of itself, and the management thought it was because of their brilliance that the business was doing so well, as opposed to living off the brilliance of their predecessors. And then we almost died.
Even the IBM PC project was sort of done on the side.
It was done on the side, and it was treated like a toy. What do I mean by that? The profits, again, Professor Christensen writes about this, the profits of the PC were so puny compared to the mainframe that it didn't get the correct senior management attention. So when Billy Gates said, let's do this deal, they said, sure, let's keep Billy happy. I'm serious.
No, I know.
I'm serious about it.
It's still saved possibly for his philanthropy, which is wonderful. Still his greatest achievement was that contract with IBM where he got to make the royalties and license the thing to everybody else.
And let me tell you, I was in our research labs in the early 80s, and we had a prototype of a multitasking operating system fully compatible with DOS, and we wanted the IBM people dealing with Microsoft to use that as the next version of PC-DOS, where IBM would do the operating system, Microsoft the API, and the answer came back, Billy will be pissed. I mean, and he was, I'm being serious, and they said, and we want to keep him happy. That's an example that we didn't treat it seriously. That's my opinion. And
so how did IBM get well?
Well, IBM got well, first of all, and I went through that first because I wonder if a company can reinvent itself if it doesn't go through the near-death experience. I don't know if there are cases. No, I'm very serious. I'm teaching a course using Professor Christensen's Innovator Solutions book, and I wonder if the reinvention requires the near death. Because what happens is once you go through near death, maybe it happens in a personal, we go through some very traumatic things, okay, so that reshapes your head, and that opens you up for new ideas.
So Apple was within, I think, 90 days of bankruptcy 10 years ago.
And that may be the reason they were able to reinvent themselves. And when we were like this, then we had nowhere else to go. Lou Gerstner came along. He's the most brilliant leader you can ever imagine. And and then things like the internet, we grabbed onto this. This was a lifeboat. And so no longer was it, well, will the internet make as much money as the mainframes? The mainframes we had lost that franchise. I mean, the mainframes continued to generate a lot of money, but it was no longer the profitable thing it was. So we clutched the internet and later Linux and things like that, like lifeboats. And I don't know if you can really, really do great in business if you don't have that almost fear of, you have to want to succeed really badly.
So I want to talk about the latest thing with which you've been associated, which is this idea of virtual worlds as a business environment.
Right.
But before I do that, I just can't resist, having listened to what you just said. Steve Ballmer, who is a very smart man, was at my conference this spring, and I interviewed him like we're doing, and I asked him, and he said, we have two main businesses at Microsoft, both of them gifts from IBM, actually, in the early days. One is the, I don't mean they did nothing, I'm not trying to imply that, but one is the desktop software business, Windows and Office, which is a fantastic business. The other is the enterprise business they have with Exchange and some of the other products. And he said that he had come to realize in the last 2 years that he had this belief, and so did Bill Gates, that the business model that made their company the most successful company and that made them two of the richest people in the world was not the business model that could apply to every product. And so he had decided that they needed to have a multiplicity of business models, and that there were two new areas that they had to focus on, which had completely different business models. One won't be any surprise to anybody that reads tech news, is search and advertising, which is essentially try to compete with Google. And the other is, and this surprised me, but he put it on an exactly equal level, consumer electronics, which is essentially to go after Apple, and which has morphed into sort of a digital consumer electronics company. I happen to believe that consumer electronics and computers are all just merging together anyway. And those of you sitting there with an iPhone really have an OS X computer in your pocket that will only get better. But here's the question I ask you. This is a company now, when you told that story about them not wanting to make Bill unhappy, Bill had 100 employees and he was in Albuquerque, or 50 employees.
I think his mother knew IBM's chairman or something.
Yeah.
I'm serious, this is 1984.
So Ballmer now has 72,000 employees.
Yes.
72,000 employees. He's trying to go after these nimble, they're still big companies, Google and Apple, but they're nimbler. And he's trying to go into new businesses with new business models. How, if you were in his shoes, how would you do it?
Well, let me tell you a question I asked myself about Microsoft. Because once the near-death experience almost cleansed our brain, I don't know how else to say it, we totally switched from being a very inner-driven company to being a much more market-facing company. And that is what allowed us to embrace the internet and Linux and so on. I wonder, as you know, Microsoft doesn't like Linux. I don't need to tell you that. And Microsoft has been fighting these open document formats like crazy, ODF and other things, because they are protecting the franchise. I wonder if the real people who are getting hurt by those fights is Microsoft itself. That when you are fighting these major innovative forces in the marketplace, your employees, you're setting culture. You may think, no, I'm protecting the shareholders. Businesses are a collection of people, and those people have a culture. And if they see that your culture is to attack Linux, or your culture is to attack open document formats, I don't know how you can have that culture on the one hand and say you now want to be this incredibly innovative company in a brand new areas. I don't know. I don't mean it's not possible. I don't know if you can correctly manage this. IBM couldn't. We almost died because we were in this culture, and then we totally switched over to this
Even
culture.
though they've built, and Bill has bragged to me about this, and I mean this in a nice way, he's not being nasty or anything, he's very proud of it, has built kind of a research a lab there that they compare to IBM with all these PhDs. And,
the labs are a back office. You need the labs. You need brilliant people. But you're going to the Red Sox game tomorrow, right?
I am going to the Red Sox game.
The game is played in the field, not in the dugout. So the labs are, no, I'm very serious. You need the players to train. They're probably practicing today. But you have to go to the field, and the research people need to be pushed out into the field. In fact, that's what we did in IBM.
I'd rather have Manny hitting than the batting coach, but I get you. I get your point. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. You talked about IBM embracing the internet, embracing Linux. The latest thing that IBM has embraced, and it's your doing primarily, is virtual worlds. Primarily Second Life, which is, one kind of the biggest platform, but as you were saying to me earlier, it's only one platform. Explain to me how virtual worlds, little cartoon avatars and, kind of fake money, and you can fly on a magic carpet from one place to another and build your little island. What does that got to do with business?
Well,
other than maybe you can sell stuff to people there.
No, I understand. And let me tell you how it came about. And by the way, I wasn't the main person, but...
Oh, yeah, you were. Sure.
If you are smart in a company like IBM that's full of really sharp people, you watch what they do, and when you see them doing certain things, you say, oh my God, that's a market signal that we need to move in that direction. And last year, 2006, I noticed that there were more and more very smart people in IBM that started to have meetings in Second Life on their own. I mean, if you say, well, did anybody tell them? I mean, obviously not. They just started to do it.
Business meetings, you mean?
No, well, they were just meetings. I don't know, whatever the hell people, I don't mean they were just having, these weren't kids. These were people with jobs, and they were dealing with each other. And what they told me is they found the experience of dealing with each other in a virtual world like Second Life more human than a conference call.
Than a conference call?
Yes.
Not an in-person meeting,
well,
but a conference call.
Of course, an in-person meeting is much better, but if the people are in the US, the UK, India, all over the world, you can only have so many in-person meetings. So in-person is much better. Here are conference calls, and conference calls are cold.
Yeah.
9 to 10, this is what you do. People don't tend to, let's say, 50 people get together, or 100 people here, and like you and I before, I was asking you about, are you a Red Sox fan, are you a Yankees fan? In a conference call, that doesn't happen. I'm sorry to have said. No,
Please.
I'm sorry. In a conference call...
Awful thing to say, yeah.
That human element of chit-chat doesn't happen, but in Second Life and virtual worlds, it does. people, when they get together, there is chit-chat at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting. And so we said, oh my God, maybe this is the evolution of the internet, and in particular, the evolution of social networking, collaborative technologies, so that people can come together, and the killer apps, in my opinion, are meetings and learning and training. And so we started building sites, people hold meetings, classrooms, lots of courses, internal things are being done in IBM with classrooms. And then we said, as we always should, to really learn about this, let's go out and see what our clients are interested in. So we have been working with quite a number of customers, trying to do prototypes, learning from them. And I think that, given that so much of what people do in business is collaborate, this is becoming a major kind of collaborative platform. Think of Web 2.0 into the future. Not for everything, for a lot of things, text-based collaboration, instant messaging will be fine, but these are complementary things.
Well, there is a competing a way of using the internet to overcome distance and to overcome the limitations of a conference call, because I agree with you. One of the other things that we all know about conference calls is you don't have all the visual cues that you get in a conversation.
Yeah.
So people can be rolling their eyes.
That's
they could be reading the sports page. They could be on eBay. It doesn't, when the conference call's on. If you have a quiet keyboard, you could do that, or if you mute. But the competing thing that HP and Cisco and other companies are working on are these truly fabulous video conferencing systems that really give you kind of a 360 degree.
But they're missing, in my opinion, two critical ingredients.
Okay.
Number one is their cost is really high.
Right.
In a virtual platform, it's a goddamn PC. That's it. And then whether you manipulate it, whether over time we like tools to manipulate them, this is really inexpensive, and you've written a lot about how as costs go down, things take off. The second one is much more important. The Cisco and HP technologies don't scale. I mean, you can have meetings with 2 locations, maybe 3. What if we wanted to have this meeting in a virtual world? I mean, we're going to have these people's faces, 1,000 people's faces. In IBM, we've built classrooms in Second Life and other platforms. We're working with a variety of platforms, not just Second Life. Second Life is good for some things, not for others. And all of us would be in a classroom. So, and all of us would be there through our avatars. And so the scalability to tens, hundreds, over time thousands. The Rolling Stones could do a concert in Second Life and fill up the equivalent.
Okay, but let me take your comment about the Rolling Stones seriously for a second, because it feeds into, and we only have a couple more minutes, and I want you to look ahead in this virtual world space. The number of gestures and visual cues and facial expressions and things is really quite limited.
But the technology
in Second Life today. You would never get the Mick Jagger strutting on the stage kind of experience in Second Life. You'd hear the music and you'd see a little sort of cartoon of
Did you see Happy Feet?
Did I see Happy Feet? Yes.
Well, so look at those technologies.
But you can't do that in Second Life today. It's
no, and not everybody will be dancing with Mick. but I'm being very serious.
So give me 5 years. 5 years, where are we in virtual worlds?
Well, first of all, we need to do a lot of research on how people work with each other, how people collaborate, how people do meetings, to know what do you need to do and what do you need to not do. For example, MIT, where I'm hanging out these days, the Media Lab is doing a lot of work in what's called digital living, which is the hybrid world.
Yes.
And it's a hybrid world. Some of it is sensors that control things in the virtual world. Some of it is the virtual worlds looking like the physical worlds. There are things like you can wear little sensor things that when you move your hands are animating your avatar or the equivalent.
They're actually
of
doing
that.
a bunch of that at Microsoft too.
Microsoft, yeah, I'm not surprised. There are things called the Huggables, the cute little teddy bear. It's a kind of laptop for children, except it's not a laptop, it's really a teddy bear with a built-in computer, and you can animate the teddy bear by animating a virtual world. So these things are really a hybrid with, the technologies we're talking about, Walter, are dirt cheap consumer technologies. The innovation here all has to come. How do humans want to use this, and what's the business model to monetize it, to make money from that? But the opportunities, I think, are immense, from work to entertainment to teaching. And we're very interested in MIT on what's the future of a global university. If I want to teach a course to people in another, campus someplace else, yes, I can travel, but maybe what if there is a woman?
Well, you could do distance learning. Your courses are on the web.
Yeah, wait. The courses are on the web. That's the passive content. What if they want me? Hopefully, I have something to contribute by talking, and the students are sitting in a classroom in Argentina, let's say. Spanish is my native tongue, so I can talk to them in Spanish. We can interact with each other. But I'm here because Argentina is 10 hours away. Boy, that sounds like the future of a potential extension of global university.
And something everyone could use in their business eventually.
Oh, totally. Everybody in their business should be having meetings also with clients, with all kinds of people. So, I think of it as the evolution of the internet into the collaborative internet that is incredibly important. And for certain kinds of collaborations, the visual images go into our brain. I think of visual images as broadband into our brain. Our brain, I think, is far more wired for sight and sound than for reading HTML, obviously.
And interestingly, the internet, despite YouTube, despite Rhapsody and iTunes and everything else, the internet is still overwhelmingly a text medium today.
It is overwhelmingly
sort of like a newspaper on your screen.
And I think as these visual things start taking over, I think it will just be one more extension of the ability to collaborate, and the potential, I think, is huge.
Well, even in a virtual world, there are time limits, and
there are time limits.
We have ours here. So thank you,
Thank you, Walter.